Today, however, we celebrate a relationship between our two countries that surely neither Washington nor King George III could possibly have imagined. The ocean may still divide us, but in so many other ways.
In a shocking new health update from Buckingham Palace, the king confirmed rumors that no one wanted to believe were true. The truth about his condition is finally out, and it changes everything. From Sandringham to Westminster, royal insiders say this moment marks a turning point in British history. To understand the situation, we have to go back to early 2024. Buckingham Palace confirmed that the king had been diagnosed with a form of cancer.
That we mustn't forget the importance of hydrogen in this mix. It can't all be done with electric vehicles. There are problems with batteries and, how you source the materials. And can you recycle them properly? And so at the moment,
The announcement came as a surprise to many, especially since the discovery was made incidentally during treatment for an enlarged prostate, which had been described at the time as benign and routine. What started as a minor medical matter suddenly became far more serious. The palace chose not to reveal the specific type of cancer, and that privacy has been carefully maintained ever since. What was shared, however, was the reassurance that the king would continue with his constitutional duties while following a schedule of regular medical treatment. He would temporarily step back from some public appearances, but remain fully engaged in state affairs, continuing to receive official documents, conduct meetings, and sign legislation as head of state. For the public, that balance between transparency and privacy became an early hallmark of how the monarch handled the diagnosis. There was a deliberate effort to keep the country informed without revealing every personal detail. In the official statement, the palace expressed that the king was grateful for the medical team's swift intervention and remained wholly positive about his treatment. Over the following weeks, adjustments were made to the royal calendar. Some public engagements were postponed, but others went ahead with care and discretion. Behind the scenes, advisors worked to ensure continuity. The Queen took on a greater share of ceremonial duties, and senior working royals filled in at selected events. It was a reminder of how the institution itself is built to keep functioning, even when the sovereign faces personal challenges. By spring 2024, the king returned to public duties. His first engagements were carefully chosen: smaller crowds, lighter schedules, and controlled environments. Yet those moments were symbolic. They projected quiet resilience rather than spectacle. Observers noted how composed he appeared, even as he avoided overexertion. Royal reporters commented at the time that the palace was determined to show a sense of normalcy. While it was clear that His Majesty's health was being closely monitored, there was no suggestion that he was unable to perform his duties. The emphasis was on stability. As months passed, Charles continued to combine treatment with his role. He held audiences with political leaders, approved parliamentary business, and met with representatives from across the Commonwealth. At the same time, he devoted attention to causes that have long defined his public life: environmental stewardship, heritage preservation, and interfaith dialogue. But the king's health did take a temporary toll. In March 2025, he was briefly admitted to hospital for observation. According to the palace, this was a planned visit to manage mild side effects from ongoing treatment. The stay was short, and he returned home after a few days, but it reignited speculation about how demanding his medical routine might be. Officials were quick to downplay any cause for alarm. A palace spokesperson described it as a minor bump in the road and insisted that the king remained in good spirits and continuing to follow medical advice. Within days, he was back at work, reviewing documents and preparing for upcoming engagements. One senior aide was even quoted as saying that they saw no difference at all in the king's performance, describing his commitment as unwavering. Those around him praised his discipline, not only in adhering to treatment, but also in maintaining focus on his responsibilities. That combination of resilience and measured optimism has become a central theme of his reign so far. By late summer 2025, the king appeared in public once again for an engagement that carried particular symbolism. He visited a hospital specializing in cancer treatment, meeting patients, doctors, and volunteers. During that visit, he shared a small, candid comment about his own condition, saying simply, "I'm not too bad." He added a lighthearted remark about getting older, joking that bits don't work so well once you're past 70. It was a modest moment, yet it resonated deeply. For the first time in months, the public heard his own voice reflect openly on what he was going through. Many interpreted the remark as a sign of steady progress, an understated reassurance that he was coping. In the following weeks, observers noticed that his schedule began to resemble the rhythm of his pre-diagnosis routine. He resumed travel within the United Kingdom, attended official openings, and presided over investiture ceremonies. Each appearance seemed to balance purpose with restraint, showing that the king was neither retreating from duty nor pushing beyond his limits. At the same time, there has been careful orchestration behind the scenes. Royal staff continue to manage his calendar closely, building in recovery days and allowing flexibility for medical appointments. The approach reflects a modern understanding of leadership, one that accepts vulnerability, but refuses to let it define the narrative. Commentators across both sides of the Atlantic have pointed out how the monarch's situation mirrors broader themes of the modern age: transparency, accountability, and resilience under pressure. Where past monarchs might have kept such matters entirely private, Charles's decision to share part of his story signaled a subtle but important shift in royal culture. That openness has helped shape public perception. Polling data in recent months has suggested that many citizens view the king's handling of his illness with respect. There is empathy in the way people talk about him, not as a distant figure, but as a man facing a familiar struggle. Still, the palace has been cautious. Officials continue to avoid discussing medical specifics, maintaining that the king's health is a private matter. What has been emphasized repeatedly is that he is following his doctor's guidance and remains fully engaged in his role. His keeper of the privy purse, who oversees the monarchy's finances, recently described the king as remarkably resilient, noting that he has maintained his constitutional and charitable responsibilities throughout treatment. The sentiment echoed what many close to him have said, that he draws strength from routine, faith, and purpose. Yet even with the reassurances, a quiet awareness lingers that this is an extraordinary period in royal history. Not since the early 20th century has a British monarch faced a publicly acknowledged health challenge of this scale while continuing in office. It is uncharted territory for both the institution and the public. The balance of continuity and change has been delicate. The royal family's public appearances have subtly adapted: less frequent large-scale gatherings, more focused events that highlight specific causes. In official photographs, the king often appears thoughtful, sometimes thinner, but still alert and engaged. In one sense, the monarchy's careful messaging is working exactly as intended. The tone is calm, the updates are measured, and the visual cues reinforce a single idea: that the crown endures through adjustment, not denial. Outside the palace, speculation occasionally flares about what level of treatment the king receives, or how the line of succession might be managed if his health were to worsen. But those discussions remain largely hypothetical. Every official statement to date has underscored the same message: the monarch is active, capable, and continuing to serve. The atmosphere around Buckingham Palace and Clarence House has reflected that steadiness. Staff describe a sense of duty that continues uninterrupted. Meetings take place at their usual pace, documents flow in and out for signature, and state correspondence proceeds as normal. In private moments, there is said to be humor, patience, and the same meticulous attention to detail that has long defined Charles's working style. Beyond the daily operations, there is also a broader question of symbolism. The king's illness has inadvertently become part of his public identity, a reminder that even figures of immense privilege are not immune to the vulnerabilities of age and health. But it also underscores the modern relevance of the monarchy itself, an institution evolving with transparency, facing personal challenges openly, rather than hiding them behind the palace gates. As the year 2025 draws on, there is no sign that the king intends to slow down permanently. Plans for overseas visits and state occasions continue. The Vatican visit scheduled for late October, where he is expected to join the Pope in a joint prayer, will mark a historic moment in interfaith relations. It will also serve as a public statement of endurance and faith after a demanding period of treatment. For now, the narrative remains one of quiet perseverance. The king's illness is serious but managed. His workload has been adjusted but not diminished. His public presence has evolved but not faded. And in that balance, between the demands of duty and the reality of human frailty, lies the true story of this period in his reign. The months since his diagnosis have revealed not just a medical journey, but a constitutional one. They have shown a monarch intent on maintaining continuity without denial, and a public learning to accept a more open, more human face of the crown. Inside the walls of Buckingham Palace, the rhythm of monarchy continues, steady, deliberate, and disciplined. But beneath that familiar calm, the past year has required constant adjustment. The king's health has changed the tempo of royal life, and that adjustment is visible not only in the official schedule, but in the tone of how the royal household operates. At the start of his treatment, royal aides worked quietly to balance two priorities: protecting the king's health and maintaining public confidence in the stability of the crown. Every engagement, every photograph, and every official statement was carefully reviewed. The goal was simple: continuity without drama. But achieving that balance took coordination across hundreds of people. Senior courtiers describe the process as a logistical puzzle. The monarch's calendar is traditionally planned months in advance, often down to the hour. After the diagnosis, flexibility became essential. Meetings that once took place daily were rescheduled to allow for treatment and recovery. Public events were spaced further apart to conserve energy. Within this structure, Queen Camilla has taken on a larger public role. She has presided over several high-profile engagements on behalf of the king, from charity events to cultural ceremonies. Observers have noticed a subtle shift in her tone and presence, warmer, more confident, and often speaking not just as consort, but as a steadying figure in her own right. Those close to the palace say she has been the king's emotional anchor, encouraging him to rest when needed and to step back from overexertion. For the rest of the royal family, adaptation has been both personal and professional. The Prince of Wales has assumed a slightly higher public profile, representing the monarchy at certain events that his father once led. While there has been no formal transfer of authority, the change has been visible, a gentle redistribution of the royal workload rather than a constitutional shift. The Princess of Wales, still managing her own health recovery, has kept a lower profile but remains a central figure in shaping the family's image of stability. Behind the scenes, Prince Edward, the Duke of Edinburgh, and Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, have continued to provide crucial continuity. Their experience has become more valuable than ever. Princess Anne, known for her no-nonsense work ethic, has maintained one of the busiest schedules of any working royal, ensuring that the monarchy's regional and charitable commitments remain uninterrupted. There have also been signs of quiet reconciliation within the family. Reports surfaced that the king met privately with his younger son, Prince Harry, during one of his recent visits to the United Kingdom. While the details of that meeting remain undisclosed, the encounter itself carried symbolic weight. For a family often defined by distance and formality, such a meeting suggested the possibility of healing, however gradual. All of this unfolds against a backdrop of cautious optimism. Palace insiders insist that the king's medical treatment continues as planned, and that his doctors remain positive about his progress. The word most often used is resilience. Those who see him daily describe a man determined to fulfill his duties without letting his illness define him. They note that he reads every briefing, attends to every red box, and engages deeply in matters of state. That engagement is a cornerstone of his personality. Long before his accession, Charles was known for immersing himself in the details of issues ranging from architecture to climate policy. As king, that habit has not changed. Even during treatment, he continues to read reports, review policy papers, and hold virtual meetings with advisors and government officials. One staff member, speaking in a rare off-the-record comment, said that His Majesty's mind never really stops. Even when confined to rest periods, he requests updates, dictates notes, or reviews correspondence. The phrase they used was active rest, an acknowledgement that slowing down for him still involves steady work. Still, there are moments when the toll is visible. Observers have noted that the king sometimes appears thinner, or his movements more deliberate. His voice can sound quieter at the end of long engagements. But those same observers also notice his humor, the dry wit that surfaces in conversation, the polite self-deprecation that puts others at ease. It is this combination of formality and humility that has come to define his public persona during this phase of his reign. The institution itself has also evolved to meet the moment. Palace communications have become slightly more open than in the past. Updates about the king's health are delivered in measured, factual language. Gone are the days when royal medical matters were treated as untouchable secrets. The tone now is one of careful transparency, enough to prevent wild speculation, but restrained enough to preserve dignity. Public response has largely been sympathetic. Across Britain and beyond, there is a sense of collective goodwill. Many people admire the way the king continues to serve despite his diagnosis. Opinion polls show a steady level of support for the monarchy, suggesting that empathy has replaced curiosity as the dominant public feeling. For an institution that depends on public sentiment, that shift is no small achievement. The government, too, has maintained close coordination with the palace. Constitutional experts note that there are well-established procedures should a monarch become too unwell to carry out state functions. These include the appointment of counselors of state, senior royals who can act in the king's stead for specific duties. However, no such step has been deemed necessary. Officials confirm that the king continues to carry out his responsibilities personally, both in London and at his private residences. In quieter moments, the king has spoken of gratitude to the medical staff treating him, to his family for their support, and to the public for their well wishes. Friends say he is touched by the letters he receives daily from across the Commonwealth. Some are written by children, others by patients who have faced similar diagnoses. These messages, often simple and heartfelt, are said to lift his spirits. This blend of personal struggle and public perseverance has reshaped the atmosphere of the monarchy. It feels less remote, more human. Royal commentators often describe this as an era of accessible monarchy, a phrase that captures how personal experience can soften the boundaries between crown and people. Yet even as the tone warms, the machinery of monarchy remains as precise as ever. The king's private secretary continues to coordinate official business with government departments. Weekly audiences with the Prime Minister take place as scheduled, whether in person or virtually. State papers arrive in the iconic red boxes each day, filled with legislation, diplomatic correspondence, and reports from across the realm. The continuity of this process underscores a central message that the institution is never idle, even when its head of state faces personal trials. That continuity, carefully maintained, is one of the monarchy's most enduring strengths. Meanwhile, preparations are underway for a series of high-profile diplomatic events. Among them, the upcoming Vatican visit stands out, a moment of deep historical significance. The prospect of a reigning British monarch joining a pope in public prayer would have been unthinkable centuries ago. It represents a symbolic gesture of unity and faith at a time when the king's own health has drawn attention to themes of mortality, spirituality, and endurance. That visit, planned for October 2025, is expected to be brief but highly visible. Palace aides are said to be managing logistics meticulously, ensuring that travel schedules align with medical advice. The king's physicians will accompany him, and contingencies are in place should any adjustments be needed. The symbolism of this journey has not been lost on the public. To many, it represents not only a diplomatic milestone, but a personal statement, a monarch facing frailty, yet stepping into one of the world's most sacred spaces to affirm faith and connection. It will likely become one of the defining moments of his reign, Within the royal household, this trip also serves as motivation. Staff describe a renewed sense of purpose as they prepare for it. There is a shared understanding that every successful engagement reinforces confidence, not just in the king's health, but in the institution itself. Through all this, Queen Camilla remains at his side, often quietly. Those who work with her note her humor and composure, qualities that balance the gravity of the situation. She is said to be protective of his time and energy, ensuring that his schedule remains manageable. Together, they have become a portrait of partnership, navigating public duty while maintaining private resilience. Beyond the palace, the public narrative continues to evolve. Commentators now speak less about illness and more about adaptation. The idea that a monarch can lead while managing a serious condition has challenged old notions of royal perfection. It has introduced a kind of authenticity that feels new. This period has also prompted reflection within the family about the future. While no transition is expected soon, there is recognition that a gradual shift of responsibilities will continue. The Prince of Wales's increasing visibility is part of that evolution, not as an emergency measure, but as a natural preparation for the years ahead. For now, though, the monarchy presents a united front. The tone is calm, the messaging consistent, and the public appearances carefully spaced. What might have been a moment of crisis has instead become an exercise in quiet endurance. Each week that passes reinforces that image, a monarch who works within his limits but does not withdraw, a family that steps up without overstepping, and an institution that remains steady in the face of uncertainty. As the world watches this delicate balance unfold, there is an underlying recognition that history often moves slowly. Sometimes change arrives not through grand events, but through the quiet persistence of those who carry on. In this case, it is a king who, despite his illness, continues to perform his role, not as a symbol of unshakable strength, but as a reminder that strength itself can take many forms. And so, behind the palace gates, life goes on. The papers are read, the meetings held, the ceremonies conducted. The tone may be gentler, the pace slower, but the purpose remains the same. For those inside the royal household, it is not a story of crisis, but of continuity, one that reflects not just the endurance of a man, but of a monarchy quietly learning to evolve with him. In the months following the initial announcement of the king's diagnosis, one event began to stand out as both a diplomatic and deeply personal milestone: the planned visit to the Vatican. What began as a routine discussion of interfaith relations gradually evolved into something much more meaningful. It would not simply be another engagement on the royal calendar, but a journey symbolizing resilience, humility, and unity. The Vatican visit, set for later this year, will mark the first time a British monarch has met the Pope since Queen Elizabeth II's encounter with Pope Francis nearly a decade ago. Yet this meeting feels different, shaped by circumstance as much as by history. The king's health, his faith, and the wider question of continuity all form the backdrop of this moment. Royal advisors describe the upcoming trip as both delicate and purposeful. Every aspect, from the flight route to the length of public appearances, has been carefully adjusted in consultation with medical specialists. Doctors have cleared the king for travel, though with strict guidelines. His time on his feet will be limited, and the itinerary has been shortened to ensure rest between engagements. But despite these constraints, those close to him say the king is determined to attend. For him, it is more than a matter of duty. It is a reflection of personal belief. Long known for his respect toward various faiths, Charles has always approached religion as a unifying force rather than a dividing one. As Prince of Wales, he often spoke about the need for dialogue between Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and other world traditions. His visit to the Vatican continues that same message, a reminder that faith, like leadership, must evolve with time. Preparations inside the Vatican have mirrored the same sense of care. Papal officials have coordinated closely with British diplomats to ensure the meeting reflects both reverence and equality. The tone, sources say, will be solemn but hopeful. There will be no grand pageantry, no processions or lavish ceremonies. Instead, the plan is for a private audience in the Apostolic Palace, followed by a brief moment of shared reflection in the Vatican Gardens. The two leaders are expected to discuss global issues such as climate change, humanitarian relief, and interfaith peace building, topics that have long defined both of their public roles. In many ways, this meeting feels like the culmination of decades of work. For Charles, who has spent much of his life championing environmental sustainability and cultural understanding, it represents both an affirmation of purpose and a gentle passing of responsibility to the next generation. Royal watchers have described this moment as quietly historic. While the king's health remains a factor, the symbolism of a reigning monarch meeting the Pope at a time of personal challenge has captured global attention. British commentators have noted that the visit seems to bridge two eras, one defined by tradition and ceremony, and another by humanity and reflection. Within the UK, the announcement of the Vatican trip was met with warmth. Public opinion polls conducted shortly after the news broke showed an increase in positive sentiment toward the monarchy, particularly among younger respondents. Analysts suggest that people see in this journey something relatable, the image of a man confronting frailty, yet continuing to serve with dignity. In television coverage, clips of the king preparing for the trip often highlight his steady composure. His public appearances, though fewer, still convey purpose. When asked about his upcoming meeting with the Pope during a recent engagement, he smiled and said, "It's always good to keep talking." It was a simple phrase, but it carried the essence of his philosophy. That dialogue, whether between nations or faiths, remains the cornerstone of progress. Behind the scenes, palace staff described the planning as one of the most intricate logistical efforts of recent years. Security protocols are tight, given the dual significance of the meeting, both religious and political. The Foreign Office, the Vatican Secretariat of State, and the Metropolitan Police are all involved in coordinating protection, ensuring that every step of the king's journey remains safe and smooth. The royal household has also made one small but meaningful decision. The entourage accompanying the king will be minimal. Only essential staff, medical personnel, and senior advisors will travel. The tone is intentionally subdued, more spiritual than ceremonial. There will be no state banquet or formal exchange of honors, only words, gestures, and quiet symbolism. Among those expected to accompany the king is Princess Anne, whose presence adds another layer of continuity. Known for her steady composure, she has long served as a bridge between duty and family. Her role during this visit is described as both supportive and practical, ensuring that the schedule runs smoothly while allowing the king moments of reflection. The meeting itself will likely be brief, perhaps 30 minutes in total, but its message could resonate for years. Papal sources indicate that the Pope intends to offer a personal blessing to the king, a gesture that, while private, will carry deep significance for many watching. It underscores a sense of shared humanity between two figures who, in their own ways, represent moral and spiritual continuity for millions. British media outlets have already begun preparing special coverage for the trip. Commentators from across the political spectrum have noted that this event comes at a time when global headlines are often dominated by division and uncertainty. Against that backdrop, a quiet meeting between two elderly leaders, one recovering from illness, the other contending with his own frailty, offers a rare image of humility and unity. It is also, in many respects, a reflection of the late Queen's influence. Those who knew her say she would have approved of this journey. Throughout her reign, she often used moments of personal challenge to emphasize faith and perseverance. Her son's decision to continue that tradition in his own way suggests a line of continuity that extends beyond ceremony, a thread of conviction running through generations. After the Vatican meeting, the king is expected to remain in Italy for a short private stay before returning to Sandringham. Advisors describe this as part recuperation, part reflection. The estate, long considered his personal sanctuary, has become a place of calm and contemplation. It is where he reviews his official correspondence, spends time with family, and walks the grounds that once belonged to his mother and grandparents. Those close to the family say that the king's return to Sandringham after such a significant visit will mark a turning point, not an end, but a moment of quiet assessment. He will continue to receive medical care and will likely resume a carefully managed public schedule. But there is an understanding that the monarchy's future is gradually transitioning towards shared responsibility. The palace remains cautious in its tone, emphasizing continuity above all. Officials stress that the king remains fully engaged, that his treatment continues to show encouraging results, and that all decisions are being made with his consent and participation. This clarity has helped maintain public confidence and international respect. Diplomatic observers believe the Vatican visit will also strengthen Britain's soft power, reinforcing its image as a nation that balances tradition with compassion. The symbolism of a monarch and a pope meeting not for politics, but for shared purpose, is likely to resonate far beyond Europe. And yet, for all the global attention, the heart of the story remains deeply personal. It is the story of a man navigating the intersection between faith, health, and leadership, a reminder that even those at the highest levels of authority face the same human uncertainties as everyone else. As the plane prepares to take off for Rome, there will be no fanfare, no public send-off, just a quiet moment between the king, his staff, and the knowledge that this journey, perhaps more than any before, carries meaning far beyond ceremony. In the days that follow, images of his meeting with the Pope will circulate around the world. There will be headlines, analysis, and commentary. But behind the surface of it all lies something simpler. A moment of shared humanity between two men of faith, both aware of their mortality, both determined to use what time they have left to serve something greater than themselves. It is that message, quiet, reflective, and enduring, that will define this stage of the king's reign. And as Britain watches from home, the symbolism will not be lost. Leadership at its best is not measured in strength alone, but in the grace to continue when the world expects you to stop. In the weeks after the Vatican visit, the atmosphere surrounding the monarchy began to shift. What had once been a year dominated by speculation and concern gradually turned into a period of calm reflection. The images of the king meeting the Pope, two men seated side by side in quiet conversation, seemed to resonate far beyond the expected audiences. Commentators described it as a defining moment of his reign, one that distilled faith, vulnerability, and perseverance into a single frame. Back home in Britain, the reaction was both emotional and measured. News outlets ran extended coverage, not filled with analysis, but with stillness. Slow footage of the meeting, the exchange of words, and the gentle nods between the two leaders. For many viewers, it felt like a reminder of what public service can mean when stripped of spectacle. The public response was largely unified. Letters poured into Buckingham Palace, expressing pride, sympathy, and admiration. Social media, often a space for division, carried messages of encouragement from across generations. For the royal family, those days following the visit were a time of quiet regrouping. The king returned to Sandringham, where he spent several days away from public view. Aides described his routine as steady. Mornings spent reading reports and correspondence, afternoons reserved for brief walks and rest. Doctors continued to monitor his recovery closely, satisfied that the Vatican trip had not caused undue strain. The consensus among medical advisors was that his stamina remained good, even if his schedule would continue to require moderation. At the same time, the monarchy began to take on a subtly renewed rhythm. The Prince and Princess of Wales gradually reappeared in the public eye, taking on a mix of community visits and official engagements. Their presence signaled both continuity and support, allowing the king to maintain focus on state duties, while the younger generation strengthened the public face of the institution. Observers noted how seamlessly the transition unfolded. There was no announcement, no declaration of change, simply a steady sharing of responsibilities. That balance has become one of the quiet successes of this period. In previous decades, the monarchy's strength often seemed to rest on the singular presence of its sovereign. Now it appears to thrive as a collective. Each senior royal has found a distinct space within the wider structure. Princess Anne with her consistent workload, Prince Edward and the Duchess of Edinburgh with their public engagements, and Queen Camilla with her growing confidence as a central figure. The king himself remains deeply engaged in the causes that have long defined his public life. Environmental sustainability, social cohesion, and heritage preservation continue to feature in his private meetings and correspondence. Several of his long-term initiatives, including support for rural communities and architecture that promotes harmony with nature, are being refreshed under his guidance. According to palace officials, he has become more focused than ever on leaving lasting, practical legacies rather than symbolic gestures. Privately, those close to him describe a man changed, not in purpose, but in pace. The diagnosis has brought a sharper sense of clarity, a quiet acknowledgement that time is finite and best spent on what truly matters. That sentiment, they say, now shapes everything from how he reads his briefings to how he speaks in public. His tone has softened, his words more reflective. When addressing guests at a recent reception for environmental leaders, he remarked that progress is rarely loud, but it is always steady. The phrase was interpreted as both a personal reflection and a guiding principle. Publicly, the monarchy's image has undergone a transformation. Where once the focus was on formality and ceremony, there is now a greater emphasis on authenticity and connection. The king's openness about his health has played a key role in this change. It has humanized the institution without diminishing its dignity. People have come to see him not just as a symbol of authority, but as someone navigating the same vulnerabilities that define the human condition. The Vatican visit in particular reinforced that impression. Religious leaders across denominations praise the meeting as an example of humility and mutual respect. Commentators pointed out that, in a world often divided by ideology, the image of two men of faith coming together quietly spoke volumes. That message extended far beyond Britain's borders. Within the Commonwealth, leaders from Canada, Australia, and New Zealand all sent personal messages of support, reflecting the enduring respect the monarchy continues to command. In Parliament, members from across political lines acknowledged the significance of the moment. The Prime Minister, in a brief statement, described the King's actions as a reflection of steady service, rooted in both duty and compassion. Opposition leaders echoed the sentiment, praising the monarch's commitment to his responsibilities during a time of personal difficulty. Inside the palace, the tone remains professional, but quietly optimistic. Aides continue to adapt schedules around treatment cycles, ensuring that the king has sufficient time to recover between official duties. His working routine now includes more virtual meetings, allowing him to remain actively engaged with government ministers and international partners without the physical strain of constant travel. One senior courtier noted that the king's efficiency has actually improved during this period. He delegates more, focuses more, and wastes less time, they said. There's a clear sense of purpose in everything he does. The same official added that morale within the royal household is strong, shaped by a collective sense of shared responsibility. Everyone understands that this is not simply a chapter to endure, but one to manage thoughtfully. Beyond the immediate circle of palace life, the wider British public seems to have developed a renewed sense of affection for the monarchy. Surveys show an uptick in support across all age groups. While younger generations remain less attached to the idea of monarchy than their elders, many express respect for the way the king has handled his diagnosis and continued his service. Analysts note that transparency and humility have become powerful tools of connection in a modern media environment that often rewards authenticity over grandeur. As the year draws to a close, the royal calendar is expected to remain lighter than usual. The traditional Christmas broadcast, however, will proceed as planned. Sources suggest that the king intends to record it personally, with a focus on gratitude, service, and unity. Those who have read early drafts of his remarks describe the tone as reflective but hopeful, an acknowledgement of challenges faced, and of collective strength found through adversity. The coming year will likely see a continued balance between recovery and responsibility. Doctors remain cautiously positive about the king's progress, advising that while treatment is ongoing, his response has been encouraging. There is no indication of any need to curtail his constitutional duties, though the palace remains ready to adjust plans should circumstances require. Looking ahead, royal historians suggest that this period may ultimately be remembered not for illness, but for quiet evolution. The monarchy, once seen as rigid, has demonstrated flexibility. The sovereign, once expected to embody perfection, has shown humanity. And the public, once skeptical of royal relevance, has found meaning in a narrative that mirrors the ordinary experiences of endurance and hope. The Vatican visit may have been the most visible expression of that change, but its impact continues to unfold in more subtle ways. In the way people speak of the monarchy, in the language used by the media, and in the calm confidence of the institution itself. It has become a story less about authority and more about continuity, less about grandeur, more about grace. As the seasons turn and the palace prepares for another year, there is a sense that the monarchy stands at a point of balance, rooted in tradition, yet shaped by experience. The king's journey has reminded many that leadership is not defined by unbroken strength, but by the ability to adapt, endure, and remain compassionate in the face of uncertainty. For now, the rhythm of royal life continues. The red boxes arrive each morning, the briefings are read, the meetings conducted. Outside, visitors gather at the palace gates, waving flags and taking photographs. Inside, the monarch works quietly, a steady presence in a world that often feels unpredictable.